This is Iceland. It's the land of fire and of ice, with Europe's largest glaciers and dramatic waterfalls, where men are men, and 4x4s really are 4x4s. And as for the sheep, well, they just get everywhere. In our first visit in 2015, Christine and I really fell in love with Iceland. With its otherworldly scenery, its unpredictable weather and its fun-loving people. We've been going back ever since, recording our adventures in photos and the occasional video. We never imagined making all of this into a film, but here it is, a few cherry-picked snippets from our trips that we hope might give you a new perspective on this remarkable country. The capital of Iceland is Reykjavik. Now that's only the tip of what Iceland has to offer, but it's a great place to start. It's also where 60% of Icelanders live. Though the country is the size of England, its population is similar to Brighton's. Reykjavik is a patchwork of coloured houses, quirky shops, cafes and curious museums. It's also the biggest working port and a hub for the vital Icelandic fishing industry. You don't need to spend long in Reykjavik before you start to glimpse what makes Icelanders so special. They certainly know how to have fun, like closing the roads for some skateboard action. Even Red Nose Day has an interesting twist here, with noses on statues and high on the cathedral. Icelanders have a strong but dry sense of humour. When we asked if our rental car could cross rivers, they told us, "Yeah, just wait for someone else to try and see if they make it, but you'll be fine. This car is tough enough to drive into a volcano." So we did. They also do graffiti with style, and you'll find most of the best in Reykjavik. The food is good in Iceland, but there's not much variety, especially outside of the capital. Just beware of the local delicacies. One of the less stomach-churning options is eating puffin. Iceland is puffin central. We really wanted to film them, but it wasn't that easy. It turned out that all 10 million of the little so-and-sos had decided to steer well clear of us. And as for museums, well yes, this one really does exist. We did look inside, but we're sparing your modesty. Oh, go on then. Icelandic politics is small-scale, but no less passionate for it. This demonstration was arguing against joining the EU. As a result, Iceland has got its fair share of very strange laws. Beer, amazingly, was banned until 1989. So every March the 1st they celebrate that anniversary with a massive beer day blowout. It's also illegal to frighten your kids with tales of monsters, or to give them names that are not recognised by the state. Although they did allow the first Elvis to be baptised in 2011. It's always informative to visit a supermarket on your travels. In Iceland we learned that vegetables are still seasonal, as it's costly to fly them in. And we also spotted the first sign of those elusive puffins. It's maybe no surprise that so many Hollywood blockbusters are filmed in Iceland. But the local music and movie-making scene is really strong too. We stumbled on one production when we found what we thought was a suspiciously happy funeral at a church near Reykjavik. It turned out to be a bunch of students preparing their film set. We also found a really well-preserved Viking village, which turned out to be yet another film set with an old house disguised as a huge rock. Although Reykjavik is fascinating, most of what attracts people to Iceland lies further afield. There's no shortage of package tours to the famous sites, But if you really want to see the country, you need to hire a car. It's not cheap, but it gives you the freedom to really explore. As well as the normal roads in the coastal regions, the centre of Iceland is crossed by F-roads that are closed for most of the year and only can be driven in a 4x4. These are not roads to be taken lightly. Bridges are optional, and conditions can be tough, but the views can be amazing and you'll feel like you have the entire country to yourself. There's one more challenge, and that's the North Atlantic weather. To say it's changeable is a massive understatement. It may be fabulous 1 minute, and then a howling storm 15 minutes later. There's a reason why Icelanders have over 100 words for wind. Birds find themselves flying backwards. Waterfalls are blown upwards, and the rain is horizontal. You just have to be prepared and go with the flow. The only key decision you need to make when visiting Iceland is when to go there. September to March for the Northern Lights, November to February for the best snow and ice caves, and June to August for the longest days. This photo was taken just before midnight. But what you'll see can be breathtaking whenever you go. Iceland wasn't even here 20 million years ago. It owes its existence to continuing eruptions where two massive continental plates are pulling apart. It's still happening, and you can see this in the landscape. It really is the land of volcanoes and hot springs that you've heard of. Icelanders harness this for their source of power, but they know they can't possibly tame it. This is Grindavik when we drove through it last year. Now this eruption has made it a ghost town. But Icelanders take all of this in their stride. Health and safety is pretty basic in Iceland. If it's guaranteed to kill you, then they'll give you a warning. If it's just a bit dangerous, you're on your own. This lake had a no swimming sign in it. Volcanoes, for example, can kill you in lots of ways. They can burn you, suffocate you, gas you, flatten you, poison you, and in Iceland, they can even drown you. Iceland gets a lot of rain, and this has given it not only its vast glaciers, but also countless remarkable waterfalls. This one they encouragingly call Death Falls. It's the largest in Europe and has featured in several Hollywood movies. Where the glaciers are retreating, you'll find famous ice lakes. These lakes are much deeper and more volatile than they look, and most of the ice is below the waterline. It can rear up without notice, causing waves that will sweep you back into the icy water. But what many people don't expect is that Iceland is so barren. 40% of the country was covered in pine forest when the Vikings arrived around 870 AD. Since then, felling for wood, the introduction of sheep and the harsh climate that limits new growth has left only 1% of Iceland with patches of small trees and bushes. As they say there, if you get lost in the forest, just stand up. Much of the highlands of Iceland are technically a vast desert. NASA considered this barren wasteland the most moon-like environment on Earth, and they used it to train the Apollo 11 astronauts. Now the landscape may be vast, but outside of Reykjavik, life exists on a small scale. Towns are small. Airports are small. Churches are small. Petrol stations are small. Many people live in isolated farms, and the larger communities are a few hundred people at most. Typically, they rely on agriculture or fishing for their income, although the 400% increase in tourism in the last 10 years makes that now a vital part of their economy too. Churches are often in the middle of nowhere, serving all the surrounding farms. Many houses are modest, and often gardens consist of accumulations of stuff rather than the plants and lawns we would find familiar. Most communities will also have a state-controlled alcohol store, which is the only place you can buy it, but not unless you're over 20, and they're closed on weekends too. One place that's often overlooked by tourists is the Westman Isles off the southern coast. You can get there by ferry and spend a fascinating day before heading home. The views from the ship are spectacular, but it's the recent history of the island that really grabs your attention. Heimaey, the main town, has been one of Iceland's largest towns and an important port for centuries due to its protected harbour. But one night in 1973, the residents of Heimaey woke up to an eruption right in the middle of their town. Fissures over a kilometre in length ripped through the houses, and lava and ash destroyed over 400 homes. As unexpected and terrible as it was, the fishing fleet thankfully was in port, and so all 5,300 residents could be whisked to the mainland safely. Only one person is thought to have lost their life. That was the start of a remarkable 5-month battle to stop the new volcano engulfing the vital harbour in lava. By pouring seawater on the advancing lava, they were able to slow it and eventually halt it, leaving the harbour even more sheltered than it was beforehand. It's not often that you get the chance to walk on land that didn't exist when you were born. The Westman Isles is also home to the world's largest puffin colony. In theory, they'd gone away for the day. We did eventually spot a real puffin, but this one wasn't very well. One thing you can't avoid as you travel around Iceland is the sheep. They outnumber people 2 to 1, and they get everywhere. And there's a good reason for this. Both sheep and horses are left to roam wild through the summer months with no fences to pen them in. They're only rounded up in the autumn, and that's a great social event in Iceland. It's known as the Rettir. We stumbled on one of these gatherings in the Western Highlands, and it really was fascinating. In the days beforehand, everyone rides out to gather all the sheep they can find on their own land and herd them to a set of sorting pens. At the Rettir, farmers seek out their own sheep and march them into their own pen so that they can be housed for the winter. It's a big family event, and everyone plays their part. Sheep don't want to be rustled, so it involves straddling them and walking them to their designated pen. And learning to do this starts pretty early. Of course, it doesn't always go well, but that's all part of the fun, and the Rettir is an obvious highlight for the local TV crews. We were seeing lots of wildlife. Curiously, Icelanders call most gulls blackbirds, but no puffins. I was getting desperate. And after 3 trips to Iceland, we just gave up looking for puffins, which is when we found them. There's so much more we could say about this curious country, but you really should try and see it for yourself. And if you can explore beyond the usual tourist spots to see the real Iceland, we're sure you'll come away with memories to treasure and perhaps a few surprises that will puzzle you for years to come. Such as, why was there a pineapple in that volcano? So give it a go. You might just fall in love with the place like we did.
Það vandi að velja leið vinna fjöldans hilli láta alltaf skríða skeið skers og báru